I want you to picture something. A hospital room. White walls. Beeping machines. The smell of antiseptic in the air. A man lying in a bed looking smaller than you've ever seen him. Tubes in his arm. Eyes wet with tears. And next to that bed, an empty chair. Because the woman he chose over his own daughter for 15 years was nowhere to be found. She had packed her bags 3 days after his diagnosis, left a note on the kitchen counter, and disappeared. And now he was calling the one person he had spent 15 years ignoring. He was calling me. My phone rang at 2 in the morning. I looked at the name on the screen. Dad. I hadn't spoken to him in 2 years. I sat there in the dark, phone in my hand, watching it ring. And I thought about 15 years of birthdays he missed. 15 years of choosing her over me. 15 years of silence and excuses and broken promises. The phone kept ringing. And I had a decision to make. My name is Emma. And this is the story of a father who forgot he had a daughter. Until he had no one else left. Let me take you back to when life was still good. Before everything fell apart. Before Linda. When I was a little girl, my dad was my whole world. His name is Robert. But I always called him Daddy until I was probably way too old to still be calling him that. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that was just starting to go gray at the temples. He smelled like coffee and cedarwood and something warm that I have never been able to name but that I still associate completely with safety. He was the kind of dad who showed up. Every school play. Every soccer game. Every parent-teacher conference. He taught me how to ride a bike in our driveway on a Saturday morning. Running alongside me, holding the back of the seat, and then letting go without telling me. I rode 3 houses down before I realized he wasn't holding on anymore. I turned around and he was standing in the driveway with both arms raised above his head like I had just won the Olympics. I can still see his face in that moment. That was my dad. My mom, her name is Patricia, was quieter. More reserved. She loved us deeply, but she showed it differently. Through packed lunches and folded laundry and showing up every single day without drama or fanfare. They were not a perfect couple. I know that now as an adult. They argued sometimes. About money mostly. About small things that I think were really about bigger things they never said out loud. But they were a family. And I never once felt unsafe or unloved in that house. Then I turned 11. And my dad sat me down on the couch one evening while my mom was at her sister's house. He said he needed to talk to me about something important. He said that sometimes people grow apart. That it didn't mean anyone did anything wrong. That he and my mom both loved me more than anything in the world. That was never going to change. He said that he and mom had decided they were going to separate. I didn't fully understand what that meant at 11. I just knew that the look on his face was one I had never seen before. He looked guilty. Looking back now, I understand why. Because 6 weeks after that conversation, he introduced me to Linda. Linda was 34 years old when I met her. My dad was 42. She had highlighted blonde hair and very white teeth, and she wore clothes that looked expensive in a way that made them seem like they were trying too hard. The first time I met her, she crouched down to my level, even though I was 11 and didn't need her to do that, and she said in a very sweet voice, "Your dad has told me so much about you. I feel like I already know you." I said nothing. My dad gave me a look that said, "Please be nice." I was 11 years old. I was still processing the fact that my parents were divorcing. And now there was a woman I had never met crouching in front of me telling me she already knew me. I was not going to be nice. I understand now that this moment probably set the tone for everything that followed. But I was 11, and nobody asked me how I felt. Over the next year, Linda went from my dad's girlfriend to a permanent fixture in his life. She moved into his apartment. Then they moved into a bigger house together. Then, 14 months after my parents' divorce was finalized, my dad called me and told me that he and Linda were getting married. I was 12. My mom held me while I cried that night. Not because I didn't want my dad to be happy, but because I could already feel it happening. I could already feel myself being moved to the edge of his life. And I was right. Because Linda had 2 children from her previous marriage. Tyler, who was 9, and Madison, who was 8. And from the moment those children entered my father's life, I became a visitor. I had weekends at first. Every other weekend, Friday to Sunday. My dad would pick me up from my mom's house and we would drive to their home and I would sleep in the guest room, Not a room that was mine, the guest room, and for 2 days I would watch my father be a father to children who were not his. He coached Tyler's baseball team. He helped Madison with her science projects. He drove them to school. He attended their recitals. He sat at their kitchen table every morning making them breakfast. And slowly, quietly, without anyone ever officially announcing it, my weekends became every 3 weeks, then once a month, then holidays only. Then even the holidays started getting complicated. Linda always had a reason. They were going to her parents' house for Christmas. Tyler had a tournament the weekend I was supposed to visit. Madison wasn't feeling well and it wasn't a good time. And my dad just went along with it. Every time. Without a fight. I was 13 when I first understood that my father had made a choice. And the choice was not me. The next several years are painful to talk about. Not because dramatic things happened, but because nothing happened. And sometimes nothing is the most painful thing of all. I turned 14. My dad sent a card. No visit. I turned 15. He called. We talked for 11 minutes. He mentioned Tyler's baseball team 4 times. I turned 16. I got my driver's license. My mom took me to the DMV and waited outside and hugged me when I came out with my temporary license. My dad texted 2 days later saying, "Congratulations, sorry, I missed it, things have been busy." Things have been busy. I stopped reaching out after that. I told myself I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't throwing a teenage tantrum. I had reached out consistently for years. I had called. I had texted. I had shown up to visits with genuine effort. But there is only so many times you can reach for someone who keeps their hands in their pockets before you understand that they are choosing not to catch you. My mom never said a bad word about my dad in front of me. Not once. Not ever. That tells you everything you need to know about who she is. But I could see it in her eyes sometimes. A quiet sadness. Not for herself. For me. I graduated high school. My dad was not there. He sent flowers. Linda had apparently planned a trip that weekend. It had been booked for months. He was very sorry. He was so proud of me. My mom sat in the front row and cried happy tears. My grandparents, her parents, drove 3 hours to be there. My dad sent flowers. I went to college, studied business, worked part-time, built a life for myself piece by piece with my own 2 hands and the unwavering support of a mother who never once made me feel like I was not enough. I graduated college. My dad was not there either. By that point I had stopped expecting him. I got a job. A good one. Moved into my own apartment. Started building something real. And somewhere in my early 20s I made a quiet decision. I was done waiting. I was done reaching. I called my dad one last time when I was 23. I told him calmly and without drama that I loved him. That I always would. But that I couldn't keep showing up for someone who consistently chose not to show up for me. That I wished him well. And that I hoped someday he would understand what he had lost. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Emma, I know I haven't been perfect. But Linda and the kids need it." I said goodbye. And I hung up. And that was the last time we spoke. For 2 years. Until his number showed up on my phone at 2 in the morning. I stared at his name on my screen for a long time. The phone rang 7 times before going to voicemail. I didn't call back. But I didn't sleep either. At 6 in the morning I got a text. It was from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Emma, this is your Aunt Carol. Please call me when you get this. It's about your dad. It's important." Aunt Carol is my dad's older sister. She had always been kind to me. She was one of the few people on his side of the family who had stayed in touch through the years. I called her immediately. She picked up on the first ring. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the effort it was taking. She told me that my dad had been diagnosed 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. He had known for 3 weeks and no one had called me. She said it was serious. That he had started treatment but that the doctors were cautious about the outlook. And then she said something that stopped me cold. She said Linda had left. For days after the diagnosis, Linda had told my dad that she couldn't do this. That she wasn't built for this kind of situation. That she needed to think about herself and her children. She had taken Tyler and Madison and moved to her sister's house 2 states away. She had not come back. My dad was alone. in a house that he had built around a woman and 2 children who were not his own. After 15 years, she had left in 4 days. I sat with that for a long time after I hung up with Aunt Carol. I want to be honest with you. My first feeling was not sympathy. My first feeling was something much more complicated. It was a quiet, terrible sense of recognition, because I had known. From the moment I met Linda at 12 years old, I had known exactly who she was. And my dad had spent 15 years choosing not to see it. I sat in my apartment for 3 days before I made a decision. I called Aunt Carol back. I said, "Tell me which hospital." I drove 4 hours to get there. I didn't call ahead. I didn't want to think too much about it or I would talk myself out of going. I just drove. The hospital was large and white and smelled exactly like I expected. Aunt Carol met me in the lobby. She hugged me for a long time without saying anything. Then she walked me to his room. She stopped outside the door. She said, "He doesn't know you're coming." I didn't tell him because I wasn't sure you would. I nodded. I pushed open the door. My dad was lying in the hospital bed. He looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Older. The broad-shouldered man who had run alongside my bicycle in the driveway was still in there somewhere, but he was buried under something heavy. He turned his head when he heard the door. And when he saw me, he broke. Completely and instantly. His face crumpled. His hands came up to cover his eyes. His shoulders shook. He said my name. Just my name. Emma. I walked across the room and sat down in the chair next to his bed. And I waited for him to be able to speak. Took a few minutes. When he finally lowered his hands, his eyes were red, and he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. He looked ashamed. He said, "You came." I said, "I came." He said, "I don't deserve that." I said, "No, you don't." He flinched, but he nodded. He said, "I know I don't. Emma, I have spent the last 3 weeks lying in this bed, thinking about nothing except every single thing I got wrong. Every game I missed. Every birthday. Every time I let her convince me that it wasn't a good weekend. Every excuse I made. Every time I put the phone down instead of fighting harder." He stopped. Then he said, "She's gone. She took the kids and she left. And I keep thinking, I gave up my daughter for a woman who left in 4 days." The room was very quiet. I looked at my father. And I thought about 11-year-old me sitting on that couch while he told me about growing apart. I thought about 12-year-old me sleeping in the guest room. I thought about flowers instead of a graduation. And I said, "Dad, I'm not here because I've forgiven everything. I'm not here to pretend 15 years didn't happen. I'm here because you are my father and you are sick and I am not Linda. I don't leave people when things get hard." He closed his eyes and said, "I know. I always knew that. That's what makes it worse." We sat in that room for 3 hours. We didn't fix everything. You can't fix 15 years in 3 hours. But we started. And sometimes a start is everything. That was 18 months ago. My dad finished his treatment. It was hard. There were bad days and worse days and days when I drove 4 hours after work to sit with him for 2 hours and then drive back. My mom knew what I was doing. She never said a single negative word. She just hugged me one evening and said, "You have your grandmother's heart." She never gave up on people either. That meant more to me than she probably knows. Linda never came back. Tyler and Madison, who my dad had coached and helped and shown up for every single day for 15 years, they visited once. Once. In 18 months. My dad doesn't talk about it much, but I see it on his face sometimes. That particular kind of pain that comes from finally understanding something you refused to see for a very long time. He's doing better now. His last scan came back with good news. He is not completely out of the woods, but he is fighting and he is here. Last month he drove to my city. He sat in the front row when I gave a presentation at a work conference. Afterward he took me to dinner and he ordered dessert and he talked about my job with genuine interest and asked questions and listened to every answer. And at the end of the night he hugged me in the parking lot and he said, "I'm so proud of you. I know I lost the right to say that a long time ago, but I am. I always was. Even when I was too stupid to show it. I didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't. But I said, 'I know, Dad. I know.' And I meant it. Here is what I want you to take away from my story. Forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. It is not saying what happened was acceptable. It is not pretending the years didn't hurt. Forgiveness is a decision you make for yourself, not for the other person. I chose to show up at that hospital not because my dad deserved it, but because I refused to let his choices turn me into someone who abandons people. That was Linda's role in this story, not mine. I am my mother's daughter, and my mother never once walked away from someone who needed her. The day my dad got sick, he finally learned what family means. And the most painful part of that lesson was realizing that family had been there all along, waiting, patiently, in a chair next to his bed. My name is Emma. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story touched you in any way, if you have ever been the child who was left behind, the person who was overlooked, the one who kept showing up even when no one showed up for you, this comment section is for you. Tell me your story. I want to hear it. And if you believe that people can change, that it is never too late to do better, even if it is almost too late, subscribe. Hit the bell. Come back next week, because there are more stories, and every single one of them is worth telling. See you then.